Every May 1st is considered the International Workers' Day, a day set aside to celebrate the rights of workers and recognize their role in nation building. Nigeria joins the rest of the world in celebrating that day, and we take a moment to look at how the Nigerian worker is faring. I mean, when we started our map, we talked about the difference between the staff and the worker.
That was a joke.
on a lighter note. But hey, the worker, the Nigerian worker, sees a lot, has to go through a lot, and sometimes the Nigerian worker is somewhat negligent, but then the Nigerian worker is also very hardworking. What are the conditions that they have to work in? One of our correspondents have done several reports over the weekend. Victoria did a report on a day in the life of a medical doctor in Nigeria. We talked about the fact that the ratio, the globally recommended ratio, is 1 doctor to about 600 patients. But in Nigeria, we have about 1 doctor to about 10,000 or thereabout. And that is extremely not acceptable because it puts a strain on the individual. But in all of this, what are the laws that ensure that the worker functions effectively? What are those conditions? What are the labor unions even doing? How much of advocacy are the labor unions doing? And how much of awareness and accountability are they doing for themselves? So here in the studio, we have the president of the Petrol and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association, that's PENGASSAN, and also the president of the Trade Union Congress, Mr. Festus Osifo. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Or should I say Comrade Osifo?
Yes, Comrade Osifo. Yeah, better. Keep it short. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you
for
joining.
You're
still wearing the comrade attire?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Once a comrade, always a comrade.
Yes, of course.
Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you so much. Happy Workers' Day, Nigerians. Happy Workers' Day to all of us.
So real quick, how happy is this Workers' Day celebration?
So Workers' Day is actually a day of happiness, a day of reflection as well, to look at the journey, the last 1 year, how have we fared as Nigeria?
You know, inflation, inflationary pressures, etc. I'm wondering, is there new conversation going on around? Can there be new conversation going on around that? Because we know that this is supposed to be something that happens every 5 years or so. But looking at just what has happened and how quickly gains have been eroded, you think that there needs to be an amendment or at least a proviso given to that 5-year amendment clause?
Yes, you are very correct, Malkwe. We've had, you know, if you remember, in 2019, just as you have alluded to, so we moved from about 18,000 naira minimum wage to somewhere around 30,000 naira. So if you check that 30,000 naira, as at then, if you check the value of 30,000 could give you like 2, 3, 4 bags of rice as at 2019. So, but today, where are we relating to that? You know, again, we say we spend naira, but literally everything we consume in the country, you know, we don't produce, we import literally everything. So when you check the value of that 30,000 naira, as at then, the dollar was somewhere around about 300 or 350. So if you check it, it was approximately $100. But today, if you marry that vis-a-vis what is happening in the parallel market, it is around, if you take 30,000 vis-a-vis 750, it's somewhere around $50. So what that means, yes, it's even lesser than that. So what that means is that the exchange rate has actually affected the value of the naira, which literally determine the purchasing power in the market. So today, we are in a real crisis. Today, the purchasing power of the average Nigerian workers has depleted. So that is why we have been clamoring that the 5 years that you put in there, because the spate of inflation is quite high. You are having average of 20% inflation on an annual basis for a salary that is not increasing. Okay. So when you put that, you see that the money has literally eroded. So what we are advocating, like as it's done in every other industry in Nigeria, we do have a 2 years CBA negotiations, but in between 2 years, you have opportunity to look at salary adjustment. So this should be done on more frequently than the 5 years that we have today.
Okay, let's introduce another worker who will join this conversation. Ilesami Jayoba, Professor of Industrial Relations and Human Resource Management, member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, member Nigerian Institute of Training and Development, and fellow Chartered Institute of Public Management, who joins us virtually. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Jayoba.
Thank you very much.
Real quick, the Nigerian worker, the question we asked just before you came into the studio had to do with the minimum wage as introduced 2019 and what it's been like. When you joined, Mr. Osifo, Comrade Osifo was talking about the fact that what inflation has done to the minimum wage is inflation and exchange rate has caused that minimum wage to go below less than half of what its value used to be when it came on in 2019. But for one who looks at all of this with a bird's eye view, would you say the Nigerian worker deserves a review in less than 5 years, as our law says? The minimum wage is reviewed every 5 years. Mr. Osifo has said it should be done more or less every 2 years. And in between that, there should be a look at it, how the dynamics, economic dynamics, social dynamics affect the minimum wage as we go forward.
Thank you very much for having me. Comrade Osifo has mentioned something very crucial and it cut across all pillars of activities where there is employment and workers are earning relatively low wage compared to international average. I think Nigerian workers should be earning one of the best, especially when we look at surveys that have been done at our own end. Also, for instance, so wages of workers globally, and it was laughing what the Nigerian sector has spent. I think that can be extrapolated to all the other sectors. Now, the review of minimum wage will go as far with the inflationary trend, ordinary. Because collective bargaining is a statutory arrangement, can't do that every other time. The 5-year limit experience has shown that not realistic, because in a situation of unstable exchange rate, fiscal policy, particularly change inflation over and above the projected reality, there should be a mechanism that allows wage to be adjusted, as Paripa show with inflationary trend. One way of doing this is to probably emulate what happens in the private sector. They have a way of internally adjusting wage. But we know indeed that the civil service, statute bar, and the fact that the procedures for adjusting wages can be cumbersome. There could be mechanisms for addressing wages to meet up with inflationary trend. Perhaps everybody looking at certain allowances, like we are looking at housing, we are looking at transport, as wages are eroded. So if there can be a mechanism to adjust at least at those levels, then workers are happier for it. I had comments of comrade that the situation of the Nigerian worker not very palatable, and that's the reality. That there should be a way of addressing this problem.
Indeed, Professor Jayoba, we'll see how we can correct your audio. We're really struggling to hear a bit of what it is that you're saying. But let me come to Mr. Festus, or Comrade Osifo, right here in our studios. I'm looking at the front page of the Vanguard newspapers this morning, and part of what they're talking, I mean, the lead story is on May Day and the plight. I always feel, you know, it's always so sad to see the plight of the Nigerian worker. We're not talking about, when you use the word plight, it's not used in very favorable light. And to use that in association with people who should be able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, contribute positively to the economy is not exactly, you know, it's really heartbreaking, so to speak. And so I think it's former Comrade Ayuba Waba who used to talk about the working poor, you know, people whose wages were not enough to take them anywhere. I'm looking at, you know, the history where the you know, this idea of Workers' Day came from, Labor Day, as it's called in some other places, which was to, you know, the idea around Marxism, the fact that people should be able to benefit from the good, from the common good which they work for. How are you, I mean, how have we shifted? You know, right now it's no longer about, you have to ask whether this is still about ideology or whether this is just about, this is a tradition that was handed down. We now know that, you know, we now live in a largely capitalist environment. Oftentimes when demands are made, they're usually made of government. But, you know, how is the new labor movement, the labor movement of today, still trying to stick with the ideology that drove workers of the times past to be able to evolve ideas such as Workers' Day, you know, equitable wages, how will I put it now, even the 8-hour working day. I know that recently the TUC hosted a dinner and some of the things you alluded to, the fact that, you know, workers pushed for certain things that will be treated equally with other workers in our own country. How have we kept these ideals? Are we still keeping to them, or have the labor unions gone to sleep?
Yeah, basically, you could, one of the, you know, in 1886, that was when May 4th, 1886 was when they had the Chicago riots, the Haymarket riots in the US. So fighting to say that we should, you know, before then, you go to work, you don't know when you close. You go to work, you spend 16 hours at work. When you come back home, you are tired, a lot of people fall sick and all that. So that was when the labor movement then in the United States started the agitation of the 8 hours work that led to the riots and lots of deaths that was recorded then. But drawing that home, the struggle of labor movement has been enormous. So it cut across different industries, from the issues of decent work to issues of working environment. You go to some offices, you see where Nigerian workers are carrying out their daily functions. It's abysmal. So these issues have been there over the years. Like the issue you also alluded to, that before now, they've been telling us, mostly multinational companies, that Nigerian workers cannot occupy some certain positions. So we have moved past a lot of these, because Nigerian workers today, they are occupying a lot of sensitive positions, cutting across different industries. But now, in the face of labor, you know, the advocacy has been enormous. One, in terms of government policies. When government comes up with obnoxious policies, labor, as you can recall, has been at the forefront, you know, has been championing the plight and the cause of the Nigerian masses and the Nigerian people. So this has been done consistently over the years. Now, if you look at different industries, we have peculiar issues cutting across these different industries. That is why you have the trade unions in a particular industry representing the plight of workers. In the construction sector, in the medical sector, in the textile sectors and all that. But the Nigerian workers have been faced with, or rather, the trade unions, we've had some peculiar issues compared to some other part of the world. For example, if you go to a place like Angola, they have some robust laws in Angola that prevent, that protect the workforce, that protect the workers. But our labor law here in Nigeria, it's over 30 years old. So what we have been championing in the last few years is the review of some of those laws, because you cannot be operating a law in 2023 that was a decree of 1986. So these are some of the things we have been championing. So we have had committees, both from the NLC, TUC, Ministry of Labour, to try and review this. But today, this administration is almost going out, and that law has not seen the light of day. So for us, we felt that we should attack some of these things from the policy standpoint and from the laws, not just going every day and asking for salary increment alone, without creating the necessary framework, without looking at the environment with which Nigerian workers are working. Because today, you have different strata of workforce. You have some that they call the contract staff. Then that contract staff is doing even more serious job than the one that you call permanent staff. So these are some of the issues that we want the labor laws to address, so that employers of labor will not continuously, trample on the right of an average Nigerian worker. And we believe when this next administration come on board, is one of the things we are going to champion from day one. In fact, when we met with the president-elect at a time when he was campaigning, it was part of a charter of demand that Nigerian workers gave to him, that these are some of the things you must address once you come on board. So we are currently engaging people around him. When he comes on board, it is number one thing that Labour is going to champion. Let's address some of these issues from the policy standpoint and also from the laws that are guiding the Labour movement.
You are aware that, oftentimes coming up with policy, much as it's a big deal, I mean, to come up with policies and and I know just what a Herculean task it can be to, get laws passed. You really have to have a very strong resolve to see them through in the National Assembly. However, we know that that is just a small part of the work. Implementation is usually where the problem lies. And even for the laws that we currently have, in terms of even implementing it to ensure that, most workers are treated fairly, especially at the lower rung. Yes, our workers are equal, but some are more equal than others. There are people who are really, really affected by the unfair policies of a number of, will I say, firms and even government policies. So how are the labor unions bringing these issues to light? For instance, those working in the manufacturing sector, in plants, those working in construction. We've seen a lot of construction coming in through loans that we get from China, and the fact that oftentimes the Chinese come with not just those loans, they also come with their workers, doing things that Nigerians are able to do. So and we know that our laws presently, look after some of these things. How are we looking at implementing the ones that our laws currently look after?
Yes, Maokwe, it will surprise you to note that most of the laws that we have today governing the labor, it's not actually, it's not representative enough. I bet to say you have to have a look at the labor law. You will discover that most of these workers are not protected. Since that law was passed, or since that decree was promulgated several years ago, we've had a lot of ILO conventions. Most of these ILO conventions are not domesticated. But let me take it clearly down home on the issue that, about the implementation of even the laws we have, like the minimum wage. The minimum wage is a law, right? So we ought to have implemented it to the latter. But a lot of states today are not paying minimum wage. Some states today, as we speak, they are paying half salaries to the workers. But these states, we've had a lot of issues. We've had strikes. The state councils in those respective states, NLC, TUC, they have gone on strike to demonstrate. They have even submitted areas that we think government could improve their wages. We have submitted, various areas that we have noted that these various governments, that they are wasting money, that when they cut down costs in those various areas, that they could be able to churn up some of the funds, or more possible the funds that they will use in addressing the plight of workers. But instead, they are still continuing that line. And strike is always a last resort. Before we go on strike, we come together, we put on documents, we put on, what we think will work, and we engage them. So we have some states today that they negotiated, and they are paying half of the salary that they ought to pay. We will not even talk about the plight of pensioners. You talked about the dinner that was hosted by TUC. Part of what we did, we got application from the 36 states that they are doing good. We said, no, they are not. We went to Nigerian Union of Pensioners. We asked them, give us a submission of how your plight as pensioners are being taken care of. We just have return from about 3 or 4 states that told us that, okay, this state, that state, they are paying gratuity and that they are paying pension as I went due. That was why we now narrowed down from the 36 states. We had just 4 states that we now gave that recognition on that particular day. And we also felt that Nigerian workers are not celebrated enough. Because we work every day and we forget to tell ourselves thank you. So that was why the National Administrative Council and the NEC of TUC took that decision to say, let us honor Nigerian workers by celebrating ourselves.
You know, the other side is how much are the Nigerian workers actually celebrating themselves? If you put out that survey across the state to say, how are you faring? And you got feedback from only 3 or 4. How are the Nigerian workers actually celebrating themselves? You know, when we started, I talked about accountability. Are the workers even holding themselves accountable in terms of productivity? You talked about the laws. Amakwe asked you the implementation of the laws as they are. Is a Nigerian worker delivering his own side of that law as it is before you even go on to say the government is not delivering his own side? How accountable is a Nigerian worker?
Yes, you know, first of all, for you to work, the environment must be created. We are here now, we could see the beautiful environment. Look at your beautiful studio. But you could go to some of these stations owned by government or government institutions, it will be dilapidated. So first of all, the tools must be provided to work. The environment must be conducive. I beg to tell you that go to some of the state ministries. You can't even enter there. When you come in, you see everywhere smelling. When you come in, you see that the tools to work are not there. It's just like the Nigerian textile. Nigerian textile today, at a time, they were producing optimally. But if you go to Nigerian textile today, when the machines are bad, these things are not being repaired, funds are not made available. And at the end of the day, they will turn and start blaming the Nigerian workers. If you come to the oil and gas today, the people, 95 to 98% of the workforce in the oil and gas today are Nigerian workers, and they are delivering on a daily basis. It is a high-level technological environment, but Nigerian workers are delivering in that regard. Today, our doctors are sought after all over the world. They are delivering. So when you provide the right environment, when you provide the tools for the Nigerian workers to work, Nigerian worker will deliver. But if these things are not there, it is difficult. For example, you go to some offices, you don't even have something as simple as toilet. So, and you ask that person, when the person is pressed, what will the person do? Some of them will go back to their home to use their toilet. And that is man-hour loss. You will turn around and start blaming the Nigerian
go back to their home to use the toilet,
yes,
and may not come back to the office.
I know, they may come back. But again, they also need transport. So go back home and come at the same time. So you must first of all provide.
Both ways.
Yes, of course. You must first of all provide that environment.
Okay, our colleagues in Lagos have questions for you. Ayo.
Let me ask a question of you, Mr. Osifo. Well, Nyota asked this question comically earlier, but I think it deserves a little bit of attention. Drawing a difference between a worker and a staff. It sounds comical, but then we also know that when workers go on strike, some people don't. Some essential workers are at work as we speak, even though it's a public holiday. So how are these interests being taken care of holistically? So even though the question was asked comically, who is a staff and who is a worker, you may want to speak to how the interests of those who do not have the privilege of going on strike or going on holidays are taken care of in situations like this.
Yes, so for the staff, normally, what is done in most climes is that when you define essential workers, you know that if they go on strike, it totally cripples the economy. And that is not really the essence of strikes, so to say. So now, there is a way you design special allowances for them. There is a way that you ought to design, there are special privileges that should be accorded such staff. In fact, those are part of the things that will come in the new labor law that we are proposing. It was part of the proposals that the labor centers, NLC and TUC, submitted to say that when you have essential staff, how do we protect them? How do we give them that special status? And also, how are their allowances enhanced? Because someone who goes to work when there is strike, someone who even work beyond the normal working hours because his or her job is essential, someone that cannot even go home except somebody is there to relieve him or her of that duty. So at the end of the day, the protection today is not that enormous, but in the labor law, it was part of the labor law currently under review. It was part of the proposals that we made, that there must be some special allowance that is accorded to such person. And again, after the strike, when the condition permits, that person should also be given some level of days off for the person to rest, because it is not just about the allowance. It is not just about extra money. No. But that person should also have time to recuperate. For example, you have people working extended hours. So normally, if you work extended hours, there should also be time that will be given to you that is called time off for you to rest at home. If you check people that are working on shift, they work 12 hours. So some work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., then the other from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So after a while, they are being compensated by giving some time off. So these are all the measures that will be defined in the new law that we are pushing. Just what Maokwe said earlier, for us, we know that it's difficult to pass laws in Nigeria, but it is the onus now rests on us to ensure that the 10th National Assembly do what is right, and we must also hold those in the executive accountable. So, Ayo, some of all these we will take care of in the law that is currently under review that we think we can fast track moving forward. But for now, our advocacy is that there should be special allowance and there should be some level of special status designed for this set of people. Then government is trying to add a lot of other services to this essential, to be classified as essential. But you know, we also see that as a gimmick, because by the time you classify all work as essential, it means that strike can no longer hold. But that clearly will not be possible.
Indeed, comrade, that's a lot to reflect on, really, and the labor movement has its work cut out for it in defining, you know, all of those areas. But watching your Trade Union Congress Awards yesterday, you know, gave me also a lot to think about. I would have thought that it should have been tinged with a lot more activism. But then again, it didn't feel like Nigerian workers were celebrating themselves. It felt more like it was a reward for the political elite who should, you know, be getting more of the pressure, you know, to look at the state of the Nigerian workers. And visibly absent as a talking point at that awards and dinner yesterday was the diminishing value of the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Perhaps you'll have time to respond to that, you know, while you're talking about this more important point, which is casualization of the workforce, particularly in federal government institutions. And I wonder if the new labor law that you're proposing will cover that. We'll find that in some health institutions, you know, some areas where I have worked in investigative journalism, casualization is ongoing, and to the effect that many of these workers who have put in years of work as much as 10 years are not rewarded. The allowances are withheld. I wonder if there is provision for an abolition of casualization to the extent that if they have worked for 7 years, they're absorbed into the system and they're giving full benefits.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. No, the idea of the dinner that was organized was very broad. 1, to celebrate Nigerian workers. 2, to celebrate employers of labor that are pro-workforce. Then also, both in public and private sector. So it was carefully thought out. Now, we celebrated a lot of Nigerian workers were celebrated across the industries. You had a driver, for us, driving is a decent job. It's a decent work all over the world. But here in Nigeria, we tend to commonize it. A driver, for example, was one of the workers that was celebrated on that day. You have an office secretary. She was one of the Nigerian workers that was celebrated on that day. You have Nigerian workers cutting across different strata, both from the high end and, in quote, the low end. They were all celebrated. But we also took a decision that in order to set precedent for the incoming government, for most especially the state governors. We identify some states that are paying minimum wage. We identify some states that are not owing salaries. We identify some states that are not owing pension. So we felt, and there were just about 4 of them. So 4 of them, we brought them together and we also gave them an award. The reason we're doing that is to prick the conscience of the other states that actually wanted the award, because all the states, literally, they wrote to us that they are the best. But when we verified using our apparatus, we discovered that no, it's not true. It's just narrowed down to 4. So those 4 were actually given an award. So the reason we did that was to prick the conscience of others that are not acting rightly. Then coming to the private sectors, some captains of industries, they were also awarded. The various affiliate unions of TUC came and they told us, okay, this person has done this. So we set a clear-cut criteria. For example, the GCO of NNPC was awarded. The reason we also did that was because if you have any friend in NNPC today, ask the person, what was their plight in terms of welfare, in terms of allowances, in terms of remuneration about 2 years ago, and what is their plight today? If you remember the PIA that we just implemented, today there is no single individual that lost his or her job in the oil and gas industry as a result of the implementation of PIA. So when you have people that are pro-workforce, people that are pro-worker, who sat down, have some discussions, and increase the salaries of its employees by over 80 to 100%. For us, that is what we are encouraging. For us, that is what we are actually advocating. So such employers of labor, they were also recognized. The reason we did that is because you have thousands of others who are not doing what they are doing. So we narrowed the number down. So beyond that as well, at the end of the day, we felt that when you have workers, you also have employers of labor. So we must be able to situate all together to ensure that when we reward those that have done well, it's also a signal for those that are not doing well to sit up. And that is why we are going to make this an annual thing.
Casualization, please, as briefly as you can.
Okay, the issue of casualization, yes, that's correct. Yeah, the issue of casualization, yes, we have been, the various trade unions, you will never see any trade union gathering that we don't talk about the issue of casualization. But we realized that in doing this, it's various trade unions across all sectors. We have been championing this. Is it the hotel sector? Is it the construction sector? Is it the textile sector? Is it the civil service or petroleum sector or the banking sector? We have been advocating this over the years. Now, we felt that one of the ways with which this could be addressed holistically is to have a national policy on it that could also be domesticated as a law, because we have ILO convention that talked about casualization. So we felt that the best way to address this, as done in a lot of other climes, is coming down to the law. We would now ensure that in the laws, but the rights of workers are protected. It is easy because in our current law, you don't have a law today that understand the issues and completely dealt with the issues. So in that law that is currently under review, this is one of the things that we have championed. But beyond that as well, in other climes, you have the labor movement and the Ministry of Labor partnering to fight the issues of casualization. But the various trade unions, they've done their best. But do we have a lot of room for improvement? The answer is yes. Today, if you go to banking sector, literally all the tellers working in bank, they are casual staff. But they sit down there at times, they don't even have 10 minutes to stand up. They sit down from 8 a.m. to about 5 or 6 p.m. And at the end of the day, you give them peanuts when they are going home at the end of a month. This is not justifiable, and this is totally wrong. So for us, even as we attack them, even as the various trade unions in those sectors are advocating, are pushing, we need a national consensus on this. We need a law that will also strengthen us. Yes, we say in Nigeria, we always like writing laws, but as labor, once we have it written in the law, it is easier for us to carry out picketing. It is easier for us to carry out push across board. So first of all, let's start from that, then we will now drive it home. But on our path, on the part of TUC, we have continuously advocated that the issue of casualization should be abolished. Yes, in other parts of the world, you have what they call outsourcing. But the way outsourcing is done in other climes is quite different from the way outsourcing is done in Nigeria. In fact, in some countries, people do not want to be regular staff. They prefer to cater for themselves all around. And what they earn when those jobs are sourced in other parts of the world is even much more than what the regular staff earn. Because when you pay them, you don't need to bother about hospitals, you don't need to bother about their gratuity, you pay them everything at the end of the month. They earn ×2 when compared to what regular staff are earning. So some people do not want to be regular staff. They prefer to be the outsourced staff. But here in Nigeria, the reverse is the case. Because those casual staff, those outsourced staff, they earn abysmally. And it's something that all stakeholders must come together to address.
All right, thank you. Let's get back to Professor Jayoba. Professor Jayoba, these are a matter of casualization of staff and the laws as they are in Nigeria. I mean, the comrade is talking about the fact that the incoming administration would have to look into it seriously, since the current administration did not pay much attention to that. But for one who is a policy and implementation person, how do you think government should go about looking at the laws, the labor laws in Nigeria, and implementing those laws?
This law to be reviewed with particular reference to casualization. It's obvious now that one of the ways that some organizations are indulged or reduced overhead is to see certain level of the operation for casual workers to carry out. So in a way, it is just a way of swallowing the big meat, whereas you just give the bones to this category of workers. So they are being treated, they have no rights as it is, and these are people that you categorize as precarious workers because they practically live from hand to mouth, and their jobs are largely insecure. They can be asked to go at any time because they do not even have a contract of employment. Now, the way to go is to see whether casualization can be...
Professor Jayoba, I really want to crave your indulgence. The audio from your end is not good at all, and we would endeavor to work it out and get back to you, but so far I want to thank you for your contribution. Mr. Sivo, the question I asked you earlier, and I also alluded to that, was I asked you a question about how the staff themselves, how the workers themselves carry themselves. Yes, you answered to say when the right environment is provided, then the workers will give their best. But in this country, there have been reports and there have been times when the right environment is provided, but the workers are not carrying themselves as they should. For instance, we talked about the fight against corruption, and there are those who will tell you that if you want to fight corruption, go into the Nigerian civil service. They are also workers. But then, the decay, where you see a civil servant owning estates in the country, how do you account for that?
The Nigerian worker is part of the entire Nigerian environment. So the Nigerian worker does not live in space. Nigerian worker lives in Nigeria. So now, if you in any country where you don't have consequence management, in any country where people live above the law, you have issues like this. You have a Nigerian, he lives here in Nigeria, he jumps queues, he does all manner of things. But when that Nigerian gets abroad, he obeys the law. The reason that Nigerian obeys the law abroad is because he or she is scared that if the law is broken, that the system will hold such person accountable.
Or that he has nobody to call to come to his aid.
So for us as unions, we don't shield any Nigerian worker that is found culpable in any regard. You have never held the labor centers, you have never held any trade union coming out to shield a Nigerian worker that is found wanting. So all we are saying is that the same stick you are using to hold Nigerian workers accountable, you should also use same stick to hold the political elite and the political class accountable in such a way that if the laws are broken, it must be addressed. There must be consequence management. There is no country that can develop when you don't have a system of deterrence, when everybody does whatsoever they like and they go scot-free. You know, so we must create that system. So for us, we will not shoot any Nigerian workers. Anybody that does not go to work to deliver his or her functions, there must be a system of accountability. But like as I've said earlier, the right environment must be created, and also the tools must be provided for the Nigerian worker to carry out its or her function.
Just going to ask you if you have a message. It's supposed to be Happy Workers' Day. For Nigerian workers, you'd like to give them a word or two?
Yeah, thank you so much. To the Nigerian workers, we quite appreciate all that you have done for this country. We quite appreciate all you do on a daily basis, even amidst the difficult economy, even amidst the reduction of the purchasing power, even amidst the insecurity. You carry out jobs, you carry out functions, you go to farm on a daily basis, even when you are not sure of coming back home. But one thing that will assure you is that let's keep hope alive, because we will continuously work for you on a daily basis. Today is your day. Go about and celebrate. Go about, have the best of food, have the best of drink, and let's hope for the best. And to the incoming government, we want to address you that you must carry out functions to ensure that the plight of Nigerian workers are addressed, because Nigerian workers are the people behind the GDP we reel out every day, because without the workforce, no wheel will turn. Thank you so much.
Well, Comrade Festus Osifo, President, Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, PENGASSAN, and also President of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Today this morning.
Thank you so much.
And Happy Workers' Day to you.
Thank you. Happy Workers' Day as well. Thank you so much.
Well, we'll take a break at this point, and we'll be talking about data and statistics. Remember, a census was supposed to hold. We've been told it's been rescheduled. You know, some people say only parts of it have been rescheduled. What parts have been rescheduled and what parts are still ongoing? In just a moment, please stay with us.